Welcome to Drum Talk, and today we're going to talk about something I heard about on Sounds Like a Drum. Now, this week I was watching Sounds Like a Drum, and they brought up the topic of snare drums and wide snare wires. Now, if any of you know me, I have this thing for Ludwig snare drums, and I like wider snare wires. But, to be fair, most Ludwig snare drums come with 20 strand wires. They don't come with 42 or 30. And the reason why I'm holding this up is my Acrolite, which I normally play, and I've played on many covers in the last couple of years, has had this die-cast hoop on it. And on the bottom, it's had a set of these on it. This was the set of Metrics 30 strand wires. Now, if you know anything about my Black Beauty snare drum. My Black Beauty snare drum's got 42 strand wires on it. My 6.5 by 14 Black Beauty snare drum has a 20 strand Canopus vintage wire snare drum. So that's what's on this drum. Now, another famous drummer who's played Ludwig snare drums for most of his career until he got his own signature snare drum by Yamaha was Steve Gadd. And Steve Gadd has been said to have had a superphonic snare drum that had some broken snare wires on it, actually lots of broken snare wires on it, and he actually loved the sound of it with less snare wires on it. So when Yamaha decided to design him his signature snare drum, they put on a special 10-strand snare wire on the bottom.
One other great little feature that is often overlooked. So if you were a fan of the recording custom snares that came out a few years ago, I believe 3 years ago, or like the new line which Steve helped design, each drum came with a second set of snare wires, which were in the box, but not a lot of people knew about them. So they look just like this. Okay, so it's a 10-strand snare wire that is spaced out. Now this gives you a really articulate and unique sound. Very similar, surprisingly, to the Gadd sound. It's an element of a snare drum that's often overlooked. You know, you kind of just you get your standard snare wires that come with your drum, 20 strand, you know, and then you leave it until one day you go, oh, I kind of, you know, might throw some new snare wires in and see what happens. But these snare wires really add a unique character to the drum, which I think you'll be excited to hear.
So this experiment today is going to be me playing the Acrolite with the full 30 strand the way you know it and love it. And we'll eventually switch to the Acrolite with the snares changed, except for this one's got a modified 20 strand snare. Now this is a standard issue 20 strand snare wire on the bottom. And what I did was I cut every other one out and made it a 10 strand snare wire. So this is more like a representation of Steve Gadd's snare drum. Now, of course, it's not a superphonic, it's an Acrolite, but Acrolites and superphonics share the same Ludwig shell. So this is a 1980s Acrolite. It's a little souped up in that it's got a triple flange bottom hoop and it's got a die cast top hoop. So it's my own little thing. To be fair to everybody, I kept the same Gadd zero ring that's been attached to this for a long time. I did not tune the bottom head or the top head in any way. The only thing I messed with was, of course, the snare tension. So you're listening to both drums tuned to the same notes, bottom head and top, and the only thing that's been messed with is the snare tension. I'm going to play it with music, without music. I'm going to go back and forth in my production, so you'll see this is the 10 strand. This is the the 30 strand wire. I hope that at the end of this you'll see the difference. Now I think the case they were trying to make on Sounds Like a Drum was that too many snare wires might be a bad thing, but I think it's a sound preference thing, to be honest, and what you get out of a drum. And the reason why I'm not doing this on that Black Beauty over there is because I'm not touching that Black Beauty. I haven't touched the head in a year. I'm not going to touch the snares on that drum. That drum sounds great. Every time I put it up, it sounds great with 42 strand snare wire on the bottom. They have the same kind of beds as this Acrolite has and as my other Black Beauty. So let's give it a listen. Tell me what you think. I'm not making any definitive answers on this one. I believe that the snare wires do produce the snare sound. Bad snare wires will produce a bad snare sound. Good snare wires will produce a good snare sound. And how you tune the drum in total, not just the snare wires, but also the bottom head, top head, muffling, and everything else is all going to contribute to the sound of the drum. So that's my little introduction to this. No conclusions on this video. I'd like to get your feedback on what you think of it. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed this little experiment with this classic Ludwig Acrolite snare drum from the 80s. Thanks for watching. Do appreciate it.